So you'll notice that at this point I've added an additional LED to our circuit. Now our first LED is pretty much as we had it before, although we've now connected using another GPIO pin, using pin 13 here, to loop round, go through another LED, through another resistor and back to ground. The only difficulty here we're going to find is how can we get two pins that are going to be running from two separate jumper wires coming from this resistor and this resistor to both plug into the same ground pin. And I'm going to show you how we can get around that practically. So here is our setup at the moment for getting the first LED lit. Now the problem comes here with wiring in that we need to get the second LED also wired into the ground pin. The problem we have with that is that we've only got one ground pin, so how can we connect two wires to that one? Well, our solution around this is where we have the ground wire coming out, we're actually now not going to have that wired to the end of this line for this green LED. I'm actually going to take that out and wire that instead into the blue rail, the negative rail that we talked about earlier. I'm just going to plug it in a bit further up the end here so it's out of the way, but we've now got a whole line of 24 extra pins that we can plug in to loop things back to ground, which is very helpful. The only issue we've got now is there's no way of connecting our green pin back to our green LED back to the ground. At the moment we come in through live, we go over the LED, we come over the resistor, but the resistor never goes back to ground, so we need to get it over to this blue rail. This is where it's important to have our male to male jumper wires so that we can go from two slots, join up two different connections on the board. Now to do this we're going to connect straight away from the end of the resistor and we'll connect into the blue rail, and that gives us our solution for getting the LED to flash. And of course this will work with exactly the same software as previously, and I can show you that working now, that this wiring still works in exactly the same way. So let's go ahead and stop that from running for a second, and we will now see if we can wire in our second LED. Now our second LED is going to be our amber LED. Now to wire our amber LED we're going to need another male to female connector to start with, and this one's going to have to be plugged into pin 13. Of course the previous one was plugged into pin 11, so actually no, it's just the one next door to it, but please do make sure you're happy, you know where that's plugging into. Now this is going to be slightly harder to see on video, so we'll try and make it as clear as possible. I'm going to go into let's say line 15, okay? So now I've got another potentially live cable that goes into pin 15. Now from pin 15, and I will just move the camera around slightly so you can see this slightly clearer, from pin 15 we're going to need to go into the LED, remembering that our LED must connect initially on the longer pin first, and we'll do like before and bridge over the gap, just like so. Once we've bridged over the gap, we know that our next step is getting our resistor in place. So I'm going to do a similar jump to before, moving slightly further up the breadboard. So I'm going to join row 15 in here, gone into 15B, and I'll join that into 10B. And of course, our last step is to join that back to ground, and that means of course we just need to get a male to male jumper so that we can go from the end of our resistor and plug that into our ground. At this point, we're going to have to develop our code a little bit further to make sure that our LED will be able to light. So to code the addition of our next LED, I'm going to come in and see what we need to add to. Now, we don't need to import the library again because it's already imported. We don't need to import the time library again. We don't need to tell it what type of set mode it is because that's going to be the same. Oh, but we do need to set up a new GPIO pin. And the one we're going to be setting up this time is GPIO pin 13. So GPIO.setup, we'd like to set up pin 13, and that's going to be an output. So we'd like to send electricity out of that pin. Now we've set up that pin, we can start to think about when do we want to turn that pin on and when do we want to turn that pin off. So let's say that we'd like to make these LEDs flash. At this point, I'd actually advise you stopping the video and seeing if you can figure out how to do this yourself. There is some common mistakes that are made when you come to do this, but we'll see if we can go through and try and work out logically what should happen. We're going to turn pin 11 on, which is our green LED. We're then going to wait 3 seconds and turn that LED off. Now, at exactly the same time as that LED turning off, we probably want to turn our next LED on. So I could come into here on the next line, making sure I'm indenting to the same place, and we could have GPIO dot output, and as well as turning pin 11 off, I'm going to turn pin 13 on. After waiting 3 seconds, all that's going to happen at the moment is it's going to go back to the top of the while loop and try and turn GPIO pin 11 on again. We never actually turned off the orange pin, which means that that's going to keep going forever and ever. So we might want to correct that. And to do that, after we've waited 3 seconds, we'll want to turn the GPIO pin off. Now, there's a couple of places we could put that in. We could put that in here, GPIO.output, and we'll say 13 we want to be off. Alternately, we could do it at the very start, so we'd make sure that orange is off and we turn green on, wait 3 seconds, turn the green off and turn the orange on, wait 3 seconds, turn the orange off and turn the green on, wait 3 seconds. So we could do it either way. We could have this line of code here, or we could have it at the top. I personally prefer it and just think it looks nicer if we take that line of code out from this point and we do put it in at the top. The only reason I think this looks a little bit tidier is so that we can see that we turn this one on and that one off, and then we wait 3 seconds, and then we do something similar here and wait 3 seconds. It just looks a little bit clearer to my eye. There's one more thing that I don't like about this code that I think would make it easier to read and interpret. But before we do that, let's just test to make sure this is running. So we're going to save that, making sure our asterisk is gone, come back in and run that one more time. So that looks pretty promising. So let's just interrupt that command, and let's just do one last thing here, which is to tidy up our code. Now, working with 11 and 13 is fine, but it gets a little bit confusing. Oh, which one was 11 and which one is 13? What might be nicer is if we add a couple of variables in here before we set up our pins. And we could set up some variables, so I could have a green variable, and I'm going to make that variable's value 11. I'm going to have an amber variable, and that variable is going to be set to the value of 13. And I'm also going to have a red variable, which actually we're not going to be using just yet, and I'm going to set that to the value of 15. What this means is I can change it from saying 11 now and just type the word green. And when I say word, of course, this is a variable being stored here. Where it says 13, I can change it to amber, and of course I have to do that at each point in my code as well. So this is pin 13, which is amber. This is pin 11, which is green. This is pin 11, which is green. And this is pin 13, which is amber. And again, if we just save that and run it one more time, we should hopefully see that that also works absolutely fine. The only benefit, of course, being that it's just a little bit clearer to read here which pins are lighting and when. Now, to take things further, I'm not actually going to help anymore. I'm actually going to leave it for you to do a bit of your own research into how traffic light systems actually work, and then seeing if you can code your own traffic light system so that it works. Once you've got that running, other extensions could be to add buttons, which we may follow on with future tutorials, but for now I think that gives you enough knowledge to be able to program your own traffic light system. I haven't shown you how to wire up the red pin, but you should be able to understand that from the previous lessons. And I haven't shown you how to code how to make that red pin fall in place with these ones. From now on, it's basically just playing around with the ordering of when we're turning LEDs on and when we're turning them off. So good luck with your next steps, and I hope you manage to get it all working. If you do have any queries, please feel free to get in contact with me.